You know what makes a great subject for photography? Water. Loads of different types. You know, the sea, ponds, lakes, rivers. There's loads of ways to capture it. Super interesting, super versatile subject. Let's talk about it. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week we're talking about photography of water. Now I'm generally talking about water out and about, not stuff indoors where you've got a tank and you drop ink in. That's super cool, but that's very much a different tutorial. Today we're talking about natural light, kind of outdoors water, the sea, rivers, waterfalls, lakes, ponds, all kinds of stuff, right? We're gonna go through some tips to take better photos of water. I have been really getting into this over the last month or so. I've always enjoyed taking photos of water, but over the last month or so, I've been really trying to improve my water-based photography. So let's get into it. We're gonna talk about lighting, texture, kind of when and where to photograph. We're gonna talk about things like fast and slow shutter speed, the kind of look that you can end up getting, choosing between that kind of stuff. And we're gonna talk about finding a subject within the photo. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the time of day, the light, all that kind of stuff. Now there's a few things to consider here. First of all, the look you're gonna have to your photo. So when you consider the time of day with lighting, the middle of the day is gonna look very different to sunrise or sunset. Of course, there's also the tide to consider. So if we're talking about the sea, you've got low and you've got high tide, both very different feels and give you very different photos as well. Let's talk about light first of all. So with the light, you can absolutely shoot in the middle of the day. I'd say you have to shoot sunset, sunrise is gonna look so good. And that is true, right? You're gonna get super soft light, super nice colors in the sky. Sunrise and sunset gonna look, ooh, so good. But you can shoot in the middle of the day. You're gonna get harsher sunlight, you're gonna get harsher shadows, way more contrasty, but it definitely can work, because you can actually play to those advantages. So for example, if you shoot in the middle of the day and you get those, the harsh sun and the shadows and the very contrasty stuff, just lean into it. Pop it in black and white or in color. I love a bit of black and white though if I'm gonna shoot in the middle of the day, because you can really lean into the contrast. Pump up, the whites, bring the blacks right down so that you've got a really contrasty image and you can get some beautiful shots of the waves, especially if they're really smashing against rocks or they're quite rough. You can get some really interesting photos. Now, all that said, my favorite time to go and photograph water is sunrise or sunset. And I'll let you know a little secret, it's almost always gonna be sunset, because getting up for sunrise is not something that I do very often. But that looks beautiful as well. But let's talk about sunset for a second, and you can apply almost all of it to sunrise as well. You get those golden tones through the sky, the oranges, the yellows, the reds, that reflect on the water, but you also get darker parts of the water giving those lovely dark blues, and it looks so good. It's such a flattering soft light to capture the water. The reflections are amazing. You can play around with the white balance in post, especially if you shoot in RAW, to get some really interesting looking stuff. I often actually push that into the warmer tones, just to see what that water looks like, just to see how I can play around with the final image. If you combine that with low and high tide, low tide obviously being generally the favored one for most photographers, you can get some unbelievably stunning reflections on that incredibly shallow low tide kind of beach reflecting the sky. If you get some clouds around sunset, that's gonna look so good. Of course you get the beautiful rock pools and things like that as well. Perfect for what we can talk about next, which is shutter speed. Now with those low tide, rock pools and different things and bits of water, shooting with a slower shutter speed is going to allow all that movement of that water to really smooth out and become quite dreamlike, quite misty. It looks fantastic. Essentially with shutter speed, you need to decide, are you going to try and freeze the motion of the water? So for example, if the waves are smashing against rocks, are you going to try and freeze all that stuff that comes up, all the water that comes up, and really capture that drama? Or are you gonna use a slower shutter speed, really smooth everything out, really get that misty, dreamlike feel to things, something you can't see with your eyes? I think that's really exciting, because it's something, like I say, a bit like a time lapse, but in this case, a long exposure, that we can't physically see ourselves, we can only see it using the camera. Either way, you need to lean into either the drama of the situation, in which case I'd usually go for a higher shutter speed. If you're getting big waves crashing and smashing against stuff, a high shutter speed is generally what you want because it's going to allow you to really capture that drama. If you're having a calmer, kind of nice feel to things, you might want to go for a slower shutter speed. Really kind of smooth that all out, get a misty feel to things. That can look fantastic. And ultimately, that's your choice to make. There is an element in the middle where you can capture the motion, even if it's kind of a smoother, much more still water. You can still capture that motion just using kind of a 1/400th, 1/500th of a second shutter speed. That's not a problem at all. Now, once you've decided on what kind of look you're going to go for with regards to the shutter speed, the time of day, all that kind of stuff, you need to do one of the most important things that you can do with this, and that's find a subject within the photo. Now, this is obviously very important for all kinds of photography. We've talked about this with landscape photography in the past as well, because this is incredibly kind of integral to photography, really. You need something in the photo which is a natural resting point for your viewer's eye. There needs to be a specific subject, and they can explore the rest of the photo, but there needs to be something there which is the resting point for the eye. So whether you're taking a wider shot of the sea or a river or anything like that, or whether you're really honing in on one area, something has to be the subject. There's loads of ways that you can do this. Something in the background could be the subject. And the sea or the river just sort of leads up to that. There's like an element of the photo that leads up to the subject. If a river is running through the photo, you can use leading lines to create a great composition to lead your viewer's eye to one area. You could use a shallow depth of field, like this photo, for example. It's a wide angle lens, but I'm close, very close to the water. And I'm using a shallow depth of field to really capture one part of the water, this one part of the wave, this one part of the kind of still water, and everything else is slightly blurred out. So this becomes the subject. Or you could use a longer lens, focus in on one part. So I've been really interested in taking portraits, of waves. So the same way that I would approach portrait photography of people, but try and do it with waves. So for example, this one, I popped it in black and white, used a nice long lens to really try and capture that wave before it crashed in the same way that I would capture a portrait of a person. So a relatively, fast aperture, get a nice bit of depth of field in there, get a nice bit of bokeh, and really try and capture that. This long exposure photo of the rock pools and the cliffs and stuff, you've got the rocks kind of in the front that work quite well as a subject and a resting point, and you're free to explore the rest of the photo, but you can come back there and it's just a natural resting point. It's not too busy because you've got that space to come back to. Whatever it is, you just have to have some kind of subject in your photo to really make it work. That's how you're going to take your photo from kind of decent to up it to a great photo. Something you want to pop on the wall. Now there's loads more stuff that you can talk about. We've really scratched the surface. If you want to hear more about this stuff, let me know down in the comments. If you have any of your own tips, pop them down there as well. I'd love to hear about it. If you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more. That really helps us out. Just a little thumbs up really, really helps us and supports us to keep making content like this, and I really appreciate that. Of course, there's a full list of all the kit used for these photos and this video down in the description if you want to check that out. And all that's left for me to say is, as always, thanks for watching.